In this video right here, I'm going to talk about the time that I had. I was fortunate, and I have fond memories about several things in life. But one of my fondest memories, and it's almost as if it happened. I don't want to say yesterday to sound cliche, but it doesn't seem like a long time, but it was about 11 years ago. A good friend of mine, a former NFL player by the name of Sean Stuckey, took me to a Super Bowl party in Indianapolis, Indiana. And in the ESPN party, when we got in, there was a group of football players, and they were all in one area. And Jim Brown was in the middle, sitting on a sofa, and his wife was there. This lady that you see right here, she was there. And from what I understand, she's possibly an attorney. My friend, he's an attorney, so that's probably his connection to her and him. But that's one of my fondest memories, is the time that I got a chance to meet Jim Brown. Now, I never got to meet Muhammad Ali or Malcolm X, but he was associated with and friends with both of these people. And I will never forget this moment. Jim Brown was down to earth. He didn't put on any airs. Any airs meaning he did not act like, hey, I'm Jim Brown or I'm important. And sure, he was in his probably 70s. He's probably about 76 at the time. He was 87 when he died recently. I believe he died on the 18th. But he was what you thought he was. He was as advertised. There are lots of people who've done far less than Jim Brown that they won't, give you time of day, or they'll look at you as if, why are you talking to me? But he was nothing like that. In fact, when I walked up to Jim Brown, I knew it was okay to put my arm around him. And I have a photograph, and I'm going to use that as my thumbnail of me putting my arm around Jim Brown. But this is how he looked at the time. He was a little bit older. And so I sit down next to him, and I put my arm around him, my left arm around him. And his wife was the lady that you see here. She was to the side, and she looked at him with such admiration that you knew that she really loved him and she admired him as a person. So I put my arm around Jim Brown, and I remember this documentary that I had seen. And on the documentary about Jim Brown, the news guy, or the person who was giving the commentary for the documentary, he made a statement that stuck out to me, and I remembered it when I saw him. Now, I didn't plan this, and what the guy said was, Jim Brown never compromised, and I remembered that. So when I put my arm around him, and I put my arm around his neck, and he's just sitting there, and I knew it was okay to do this. I shook his hand. Strong hands, big strong hands at the age, and it's like 76, late 70s. And I put my arm around him, and he didn't flinch or anything. It was almost as if like we were related or something. Like he was not necessarily my grandfather, but he had a fatherly love to it. And I said to him, and there's music going on like that, but I said to him in his ear, I said, I'm glad you never compromised. That was the first thing that came to my mind, because I had heard him, the guy on the documentary, say Jim Brown never compromised. And guess what he said to me? I never forget it. He said, don't you compromise. Wow, knocked my socks off right there. And he was just sitting there, and it was so, you felt so comfortable talking to him. And he was very stoic at the time. But once again, he was in his 70s. So I'm going to get into his life here. Jim Brown was born James Nathaniel Brown, February the 17th, 1936. And he died May the 18th, which is only 3 days ago. Today, it makes 3 days of 2023. I was hurt when I heard this. But Jim Brown lived a good life. He lived to be 87 years old. He was in Los Angeles, California when he died. His height was 6'2", 232 pounds. Jim Brown retired early in his career and he went on to the movies. Jim Brown did not play football for a long period of time. And he was in Syracuse. He played at Syracuse from 1954 to 1956. He was drafted in the first round, number 6 pick in 1957. He was an NFL champion in 1964, 3 times most valuable player in 57, 58, 1965, rookie of the year in 57, 8-time first team All-Pro, second team All-Pro was 1962, Pro Bowl 57 through 1965, rushing leader 57 through 61, 1963, 1965, the yards leader. So I could read on and on and on. This is a long script here about his awards. And he retired, his number was retired and at Syracuse, his number 44. He was a unanimous All-American in college. So that was just the beginning of his life because he was still a young man. His total NFL career rushing yards were 12,312 yards. That's his total rushing yards in the NFL. And he had 20 receiving touchdowns and 2,499 rushing yards. Those are, no, receiving yards. 262 receptions, 106 touchdowns. Average 5.2 yards a carry. Pro Football Hall of Famer and College Football Hall of Famer. So that was just the beginning of Jim Brown's his life. He had a few acts, just like acts meaning A-C-T-S, not acts. A few acts, as Ali did. Ali had a life in boxing, and then he had a life that went far beyond boxing. So Jim Brown was like that. So when I met Jim Brown, I felt like I was meeting all of these heroes and people that I had read about, like Malcolm X and also the great Muhammad Ali. So interesting times right there. Jim Brown, I'm going to let the great Iron Mike Tyson give a little snippet about Jim Brown. Now, he's not going to say exactly what he did, but I'm going to tell a short story about what I heard, but I don't have any reference to that. So let's hear what Tyson had to say about Jim Brown. Make it run.
You don't know how badass Jim Brown when he was young. Jim Brown was an ass-kicking motherfucker back then. Yeah.
This before football.
No, this is during football.
During football, okay.
Yeah, and after football too.
Playing.
Yeah, he would smack you. He was just interesting. he was just interesting. Listen, you guys really don't know.
So the rumor has it that Jim Brown, if Jim Brown went to a club, and you'll see Jim Brown on these 1970s exploitation movies, and you can tell he was in and he was hip by the way the people responded to Jim Brown. Okay, I think it's called Black Godfather or Godfather of Harlem, like that. And the movie is centered around Jim Brown. Go look up some of these black exploitation movies. Also, he was a great Western actor. So if you look that up, he has some great Western movies. I did not take notes. I do this for fun. But he had a few Western movies. I loved them. I did not have to fight to watch them, meaning it was easy to watch. I didn't have to force myself to watch it. That put me on to Fred Williamson, who's still alive. Those guys had some great Western movies. Go look up those Westerns from Jim Brown and Fred Williamson. You'll like them. Guarantee that. So story has it that Jim Brown would go to a club. Jim Brown might go to a bar. This is when he's in the NFL. Now, mind you, this guy's 6'2", 230. And rumor has it that he would go into a bar, and if someone just annoyed him, he would turn the whole bar out on his own. Throwing chairs around, turning tables over. If he might not even like the music there, and he would cut up like that. But at the same time, I don't know if that's true, but those are rumors about how tough he was and how he didn't take any stuff or nonsense from anybody. So that's what the great Mike Tyson had to say. I'm going to play a little bit of highlights right here and let this run and let them talk about Jim Brown for a second here. But this is an interesting character. They need to make a movie about Jim Brown. It would be awesome. Let's go.
This is a picture of Jim Brown, and I treasure that very much, but I treasure the words even more. Bert, a friend over 25 years. You have remained a man, and a man of his word. And that's rare. Your friend, wherever you are, Jim.
Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. The pro game in the pop age had a number of superstars, but only one Superman, and he was Jim Brown.
Jim thought on Sundays, and these are his words, that he was a god. That nobody could hurt him, nobody could touch him, nobody was better. And he proved it every Sunday. He always shocked everybody, I think, how fast he was.
Mm-hmm.
And then you tack onto that 225 pounds and mean.
And mean. I can believe that.
In 9 record-setting seasons, Jim Brown led the league in rushing 8 times. Brown was a 3-time MVP. He is the only runner ever to average over 100 yards per game and over 5 yards per carry for a career.
That so-called macho, which I hate that word, but he embodies it.
I played 9 seasons. I never missed a game.
9
and
seasons.
I never laid out on the football field. I might not have the greatest ability of everybody, but the one thing that stands is that when it was time to play, I was there.
And this is just him playing football. So you could, if you ever met him, trust me, when I say he is who he say he is, you could tell. But a man that's 6 feet tall, this kind of puts me in the mind of Adrian Peterson watching Jim Brown right here. It's not a lot of flash. He doesn't look like he has tremendous speed, but he's gonna get the job done. And believe it or not, Adrian Peterson is kind of tall too. I bumped into him at a Super Bowl party. Make it run.
He was the NFL's all-time leading rusher and touchdown king when he retired. With an NFL championship and nothing more to accomplish, Brown walked away when he was just 29.
Yeah, Jim Brown stopped playing football when he was 29.
I was happy. I had 9 good years. I did all the things I wanted to do. I went into movies. I started talking to pretty girls. Oh, I've never looked back.
Brown and Reynolds first met when they were co-stars in the 1969 Western 100 Rifles.
There was a scene where we had to fight each other. So I fought him on a cliff, about 75 feet down to the first rock, and then he got me dangling there. He said, "You know, I'm really getting kind of sick of this height." I said, "Really? Well, screw you. If we fall, it's going to say Jim Brown, an unknown actor, died." For me, a lot of people want to talk about other actors. Nobody wants to talk to Jim Brown about other football players. They want to talk about Jim Brown. I think even people that never even saw him play, you say Jim Brown, and they sort of whisper. Did you see him? Did you know him? He was everything I hoped he would be, and a hell of a lot more.
That's amazing. So with Jim Brown, you know he was a great athlete, and he went on to be a movie star too. And he was a very conscious person. He was aware. He knew who he was. And as the commentator said on the documentary about Jim Brown, he didn't compromise. And he was very intelligent from what I experienced. And I didn't sit down and talk to him for a whole hour. But the conversation that I had with him, I'll never forget that. That was amazing. I'm going to let somebody else talk about Jim Brown. Run it.
Jim Brown, All-American, All-Pro football star, in his first motion picture, with a heart as big as his gigantic stature.
You're watching Pick of the Flicks with Tony Douglas, and welcome to my Internet Actors Database web series, where I take an actor and put their filmography under the microscope. Today we turn our attention to the Western genre for a special Fistful of Cowboys countdown. On with the show.
Come on, get up. Oh, no, not me. You just insulted number one brave. You gotta fight him, that's what proves a man's a man. I'm not gonna fight this midget.
That's Fistful of Cowboys. Fistful of Cowboys. Now, this is Raquel Welch, by the way. And this was a time when the quote-unquote black actors were not allowed to date outside of black women.
Jim Brown Westerns in order of release for historical reference. On with the countdown.
These are some of his movies right here. 100 Rifles. I'm going to look these movies up and watch them. It Rides with the Great Western, Jim Brown, Lee Van Cleef. Kid Vengeance, looks like. Kid Vengeance. Tell us your favorite Jim Brown movie. Okay. Well, that's all I have to say. That's my story. I was fortunate enough to meet Jim Brown, and I'm glad and happy that I do have that story because once again, I did not get to meet. I've seen where Malcolm X was buried. I've been to where Bruce Lee was buried. I never got to meet Muhammad Ali. Jim Brown was the closest, but that experience I'll never forget. It's so fresh in my mind, and I feel like one of my I feel like one of my friends died, or one of my relatives. I'm not distraught. I had a mother die, and she was 64, but Jim Brown lived to be 87. And also, Jim Brown wouldn't want you to feel sorry for him, so I'm not playing any type of piano music and saying rest in peace Jim Brown and God bless Jim Brown, because as tough as he was, Jim Brown would tell you, he would probably tell you not to worry about him, and that was clearly an amazing person. He was a person that when you met him, you knew you had met someone. I'm going to leave it right there, and that's where I'm going to stop. When you met Jim Brown, you knew you had met someone. I never saw him run a football in my life, but I was fortunate enough to know who he was by way of reading and YouTube and documentaries, and his involvement with the civil rights movement with Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was probably at the time Lou Alcindor. They came together to try to support Muhammad Ali. And back then, people, the celebrities and the stars back then, they were willing to stand up. I don't know how deep that goes, but they would come together and support each other. And I don't see anything wrong with that, because they weren't asking for anything other than, I don't like to use the word equal treatment, but if the law says this is how things should go, then we want the same rules to be applied across the board. So that's not asking too much. It's like, hey, just don't mistreat me. That's all they were saying. But anyway, that's my interpretation of the situation. I'm so glad and happy I got to meet the great Jim Brown. And I know he wouldn't want you to feel sorry for him, so don't. And like Jim Brown told me, don't you compromise. Peace.